get in touch with me. There's ways there to get in touch with me and go on Twitter and so forth. And at this point, I would like to open up the floor to you and get your comments, questions, feedback. I'm really curious to know, I spoke today about some philosophical issues and some practical issues, and I'm intending to give this talk again, and I'd like to know from you, are you more interested in the philosophical stuff or the in the trenches stuff? Where should I put my focus more? And let's see, what parts should I leave out? What parts are boring? Which parts should I talk about more? I'd like to do a whole talk on Mayan time. Is anyone interested in that? And let's see. Oh, and if you have time-related stories from the trenches, share those. And especially, how have you solved latency issues? I'm interested in that too. Are any of you working on clocks or calendars? That kind of thing. So now it's your turn. Hi.
Hi, good morning. My name's David. Lovely talk. I loved it.
Thank you.
It's one of the things that intrigued me is the idea of some sort of universal clock, something that's not time zone related. It made me think of the work of the economists who worked in Brazil with the real and separating physical currency from a conceptual currency. And I'm wondering if we could do the same thing with time, that there's some exchange unit of time, and what we would get if we had something that wasn't tied to a schedule, but rather tied to a notion of a value of time rather than a duration of time. I don't know how that would work, but it's getting some wheels turning, so I appreciate that. And in terms of what to take out and leave in, it's perfect. I love it just as is.
What's your name?
David Swedlow.
David, thank you. If any of you have some ideas, share them with David of what that value for time could be, that universal. Yeah, hi.
Hi, my name is Aubrey, and I work for a company called Memo Lane. And you asked if there were some stories from the trenches, and we're actually building it's a timeline for your social media, your life online, and we aggregate all of your digital stuff. And I'm not trying to pitch, but I figured you might want to hear about Memo Lane if you haven't.
Memo Lane?
Memo Lane. And if anybody here is an interaction designer that does anything with time, I'd love to connect with you and hear what you think. That's what I do. I just try to solve timeline interface issues all day.
Oh, wow. I'd like to talk to you some more.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, a question about searching time. So, when we talk about search, it's really a very complex series of things. It's input, it's output, it's how the results are grouped, the context in which they're presented to the screen, both visually and then conceptually. Search is very complicated. So one thing you didn't much talk about was the idea of searching through timelines. And it seems like the hard problems there both have to do with scope and duration. And if you're measuring seconds versus eons in the same search scope, what are your experiences? That's a problem I'm trying to figure out for a project. Mm-hmm. So when you get results back from searching a huge timeline, how do you make it sensible for the user, other than just being a static list of entities?
I have no idea.
No.
Does anybody?
I mean, it's sort of a...
That's a really good question.
All right. So
yeah.
Maybe you can research.
If anyone has any information about that, speak up. Yeah.
2 questions, and it might just be one answer from you. Do you have any examples of synchronic time that would just help us think outside the box? And also, do you have any examples of other cultures' perceptions of time that you've either brought or wanted to bring into a Western culture that might allow users to better or more efficiently interact with our systems? And I know efficient is a Western word.
Yeah, that's an oxymoron question you just brought up there. The first part of your question, examples of synchronic time, I think basically if you just look at children, you'll get your answer. And if you look at software designed for children, maybe that answers the second part of your question as well. Okay. If you look at anything that will grab a kid's attention, because kids tend to be not sequential, especially very young ones, and just go watch kids. I think maybe you'll get your answer.
Hi, my name is Evo. You talked about wanting this universal time. Well, what about swatch time?
What about it?
Remember swatch time that came out about 15, 20 years ago? They were trying to break up the time into, what was it, beats, 10 sequential beats throughout the whole thing. And Swatch, the Swiss watch company, had really done a lot of work in that, trying to make this the new way that we visualize time. But, of course, at the end of the day, they just wanted to sell watches, so it kind of went away. So check out swatch time. It was,
okay, thanks.
And if you can figure it out, would you let me know what the hell it was all about? Because I'm really, really lost it. Thanks.
Oh, that's a great tip. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, good morning. My name is Rex.
Hi, Rex.
When you spoke about synchronic time, I was reminded of being out at the Burning Man Playa and the concept of playa time, where commitments become more of, like you said, a desire rather than an actual commitment to show up. I'm just curious, do you see, and perhaps this is my sequential time bias culturally, but do you see synchronic time as being a limiting factor in society's scaling beyond the more tribal aspects of, for instance, a Burning Man or a smaller, less structural community?
I think that that's a dialectic out of which something totally new is going to emerge. That's really the cusp of our growth as humans, because in order to grow and develop as humans, we are going to have to be in the now and act efficiently and sensibly in a very be here now kind of way. We won't have a lot of time for reflection because there will be more and more issues around the earth that will call for our immediate attention, and we'll have to make wise and sensible decisions. At the same time that we're in the now, we somehow have to balance off long-range knowledge of history. It's going to be a new way of being that's emerging for sure, and maybe that's what they are talking about when they talk about an end to time. I don't know, just that's where I'm at. I could talk some more. Yeah.
I was reminded with one of the visualization slides you showed of a website I found called everytimezone.com, which is, I have nothing to do with, it's just my homepage a lot because it's very handy. But it does a really great job of showing how all the time zones kind of interact.
Yeah, I use that one too.
Yeah, it's great. And I had a question though, if you'd ever dealt with kind of applications that and time like Flash or After Effects, because I always think that there's got to be a better way of dealing with some of that stuff than the timeline messes that kind of appear there, or even in Photoshop, how it has like the history palette and the undo, and how those concepts kind of relate at all to kind of the research you've done or the thinking you've done.
Yeah, I mean, when we're in a web interface, we're in the deep present. And when you go back, you don't really go back. You go forward because you're going forward in time, but you're going back. And cognitively, your brain doesn't know what to do with that. So, yeah, I've done a lot of thinking about it, but I can't, at this point, I have a lot of questions, like you, and I call on somebody here to solve this one.
Thanks.
Thank you.
In thinking about this talk today and coming to it, I was reminded by something that I came across quite a while ago. There is a design firm that I'm not affiliated with from the UK called proteinos.com.
Yeah.
And they designed a clock that they call Chromo. And it's based on a color wheel. So it's a cyclical clock that applies both to daily time and lunar time.
Huh.
And they visualize it in lots of different ways, whether it's a block of color squares or a cycling single color square, or even just a watch that changes color according to the time of day.
Cool.
The problem that comes to my mind always in thinking about that is when somebody asks you what time it is, what do you tell them?
Yeah.
But it is an interesting alternative to a universal clock.
Thank you. I'm going to look that one up. I think, speaking of time, that we are out of time. Thanks all very much for coming.